An inquiry of ministry made by Conservative MP Kelly McCauley reveals how many contracts have been provided to third-party consultants related to the processing of requests made under the Access to Information Act since January 1st, 2020. So in this case here, we're dealing with FOIA requests. So this is the general public here in Canada asking the government for transparency on a number of things related to COVID. And the government is essentially going to third-party consultants to help them with processing these requests. So a report revealed that contracts ranged anywhere from $15,000 to nearly $200,000 in paid work for these consultants. What work were they doing? Well, in some cases, they were simply providing technical advice to the government, but in other cases, they were redacting or blacking out documents, or to put it another way, they were censoring documents. Perhaps the worst part is the fact that Canadian taxpayers are footing the $39 million bill the Liberals have spent to censor these documents that have been requested by the Canadian public. Now, some of the companies who collected the money for their work with the Canadian government are as follows. Altus Human Resources, Inc., who received $15.8 million. Maxi Staffing and Consulting received $3 million. Excel Human Resources received $2.2 million. Michael Wager Consulting Incorporated received $1 million. So instead of using their own paid employees, the Canadian government has stated that they are spending all of this taxpayer money on FOIA request consultation because they need help reducing the current backlog of access to information requests, which have accumulated over the past couple of years. Now, I believe their statement here to be true because, this is what we've experienced when we get messages back from various caseworkers on our own FOIA requests stating, due to the large number of FOIA requests that we've been receiving, things are taking a little bit longer. Not to mention the fact that the Canadian government has been making some rather shady and curious policies and decisions over the last few years while providing very little transparency to the Canadian public who've become ultimately frustrated. Now, to give you a real-life example of our experiences with FOIA requests this year, especially as it relates a lot to the topic that we're covering in this video, some of our requests regarding Freedom Convoy protests have come back with very lengthy time extensions and messages like this. This extension is necessary in order to complete consultations which are required to comply with your request. Now there's that word consultations, which we've now learned the government has spent $39 million in order to get. And when I ask how much of our documents that we're requesting are going to be redacted, I often hear things like, it's hard to say. It all depends on the content of the information. It is likely that some, if not most, would be redacted. So to be clear here, the government is saying, yes, you have freedom and access to information based on the decisions we make, but then they're going to redact or censor the vast majority of that information and charge the Canadian taxpayer about $39 million in order to make that happen. So what does this increased request for more transparency from government say about how our collective culture is changing here in Canada and as well as around the world? Are people suddenly realizing the level of corruption that is associated with government? Are they becoming less trusting of government for good reasons or for bad reasons? Now, if you were to ask me, I would say that governments have taken many divisive actions that have been very harmful to the public over the last several years. And to be fair, this has been going on for decades. Now, on the other hand, politicians and media pundits, as well as popular culture, kind of just wants you to believe that people are suddenly delusional, and thus their untrusting and conspiratorial ideas are nothing more than a mental illness. Now, to me, this behavior on behalf of government comes from a culture of dominance, one that is fueled by trauma and the need for more control. Government and wider society operating from these ideologies and pain points doesn't produce a thriving society. It produces one that is disconnected and has billions of people struggling. The interesting part is this struggle is all man-made. We have artificially set up barriers to harmony and abundance for all people. And no, I'm not talking about some out-of-reach utopian society. Life could be much easier and simpler for people, but it's artificially made not to be. And we maintain this reality every single day. While some would argue this dominance is nature. We see it all the time in the animal kingdom, and thus humans will do it too. But this isn't entirely true. Humans have higher order thinking and reason. The question ultimately becomes, how will we decide to use this reason? We could, of course, use our reason and intellect as human beings to cooperate and act to create a thriving world, or we could use our intellect and reason to manipulate one another and dominate. It's literally our choice. The question becomes, what path will you choose? I personally find it hard not to allow my thinking and feelings to go towards these deeper questions when dealing with stories like this. After all, if we truly want to solve the problems we see in our society today, I believe we have to radically solve them by understanding how they are made at their core. Simply calling leaders bad and evil people seems lazy and unproductive to me. Think for a moment about our own lives. What makes us not want to be honest all the time? What makes us hide things? Have we ever been in a situation where we're trying to manipulate others? If so, why? Perhaps it's here that we can begin to explore and understand the ideology of government and leaders. Perhaps it's here where we can break the illusion that they are acting in our best interest. And of course, perhaps it's here where we can begin to determine if we ourselves are acting and embodying the type of change maker our world ultimately needs right now. The moment we can begin to do this and reflect in this manner is the moment we begin to move towards creating a better world and radically solving challenges at their core. Thanks so much for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe and pass this on to others. Here at The Pulse, we're always dedicated to a new way of doing news and media, one that ultimately looks at solving problems at their core, as we just mentioned earlier. That's it, that's all.